Hey there, I'm Michael Whalen, and you found me here in my studio here in New York City, and I'm going to talk about my new album. My wife and I moved to the water in New York City. So when I tell friends I live on the water in New York City, they think Manhattan and I live in a high-rise someplace and I live on the river. I don't. I live on Jamaica Bay in Queens, and we live on the water, like the water splashing on my house all the time. And watching the seasons change, watching nature, just how incredibly gorgeous it is, was a huge change for me, because I've lived in cities, New York City, for my entire adult life, but being here in this environment has been so deeply affecting to me as a composer. Like I didn't even realize it. So in 1986, I was in college. I lived at my parents' house in Georgetown in Washington, D.C., and I was absolutely captivated by this record label called Windham Hill, and they had all this instrumental music. And they had George Winston, and they had Mark Isham, and they had Will Ackerman, and they had Alex DeGrassi, and they had Michael Hedges, and they had all these people. That time, 1986, 1987, the music that was being made, the sounds were, even now, 30, 40 years later, are such an influence on my music. There's an album called Unusual Weather by Michael Manring, who is a bass player. And, for a lot of people, they go bass on sort of melodic instrumental music. Michael is a force of nature. I had worked with Michael on an album that I did last year, and I reached out to him and I said, hey, I got these piano ideas. He started working on doing the bass for this project that had sort of yet to have kind of like because usually what happens when I make a record, I make a cover, I have song titles, and I make a record. All of a sudden, I have this album where it's Michael Whalen and 5 Grammy winners. And I'm like, what is happening here? Because of the way this album came together, and because of everyone being so generous, and this sort of came together as this huge sort of collaboration, all of a sudden I just remember looking into the sky here, and I'm crazy about watercolor, and I was just like, watercolor sky. It seems like every day, but like every other couple of days I'll take a sunset picture or a bunch of sunset pictures, and now I have hundreds of them. The cover of the record is featuring one of my, actually it's not a sunset picture, it's actually a sunrise picture. I didn't really understand until I got to the end of this that I had created kind of a Valentine to my living here. I felt like as an artist, I wanted to give back to what this place had already given me in 14 months of living here. I think environments are really important, like the room you create in, where you live, how you live. And I think as a creative person, all of those things make a difference. But when you go outside and you see something incredibly beautiful, almost every time you go outside, you see something in the water, you see something with the birds, you see some kind of wildlife, you're so connected to what's happening in the natural world, and you're in the city. I can still walk to the subway here. So it's a bizarre kind of dichotomy here. I'm in the city, I have all that access to one of the biggest urban areas in the world, and I'm surrounded by natural beauty, and I'm surrounded in a place where nature is kind of demanding that you pay attention to it. Like, we live in a place that is so close to the water that it floods when we have lunar tides and wind and rain and whatever. So I am connected to the world in a way that I have never been. And I think that has really affected my music. And it's certainly affected the music on this album. And one of the things that makes me really happy about this record is how optimistic it is. And there's beauty, and there's like a real sense of like grace to it. And I think part of that is like, that's the world I want to live in. But the other part of it is that that's the world that's being shown to me. And so, Watercolor Sky is an important record for me because I was given something, and this is my attempt at giving something back.